Hello everybody, it's Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today I have the pleasure to once again be joined by the great Harry Gregson-Williams. For many years, Harry has been one of Hollywood's most prolific and sought-after composers. On this episode, we will talk about his work with director Ridley Scott on films such as The Last Duel and House of Gucci, and also cover some of Harry's most recent efforts. It is my pleasure to welcome back Harry Gregson-Williams.
Hey, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How about you, Harry?
Good. I'm doing just fine.
Before we dive into your collaboration with Ridley and also your brother Rupert, I would like to just start off with something that fans or up-and-coming composers in general might want to know more about, because I don't think there is a silver bullet when it comes to solving a problem or a musical equation. And young composers are always interested in these things as they try to break out into the music industry and try to find a way to handle stressful scenarios and how to communicate with filmmakers. What is your approach and your tip, if I may ask?
Well, look, listen, you might have asked, how do you deal with volatile teachers at your kid's school, or how do you deal with a grumpy lawyer or a doctor or a plumber? You know, I think, I think if you're a well-rounded person, you find a way to navigate these things. It's just part of life. You know, as a film composer, we're in touch with other creatives, and we have to navigate our way through tricky situations, through stressful situations, but also through, great fun situations. So after having scored a movie like The Martian, for instance, Ridley couldn't have been happier with the score. He went on to win Golden Globe, this, that, and the other. I think some other people who contributed to that movie did. That everybody's happy. Everybody's happy. The box office was great. All the business side of things, which got nothing to do with me, but everybody was happy. So wheel on to a movie like Mulan. Everybody's unhappy. The movie gets dumped onto Disney Plus, never gets a theatrical release. I was completely unhappy with that, not with the experience, but with the destiny of that movie. I felt it deserved better, but the world dived into a COVID situation. What can you do? So yes, film music is like life to me. It's something that happens, and it's something I've become accustomed to. A lot of the time, one finds that one's working under stress. If you're the sort of person who can manage situations, then you should be fine. And we haven't even talked about the musical side of things. So how do you manage that musically? Well, I think initially you should get yourself a really firm musical education and a firm musical foundation from which to navigate all these this roller coaster that we live on. Without that, I think it would be impossible. So I think that's what we all of us film composers fall back on, is our musical knowledge and experience as things go by. And of course, one doesn't have that to begin with. You've got to start somewhere. As a composer starting off, I think you've got to dive in and you've got to just give it a go.
And thank you for elaborating on that, Harry. And you've just mentioned musical education, also life itself. And I think there is always a big learning curve, no matter what you do, no matter what your profession is. And you've been in this game for so long. Do you think you still learn something on a daily basis or a weekly basis, which is vital?
By project, yes, because inevitably one makes mistakes, and one has small successes, and one takes those on board and uses them. And this is what experience is understanding what went well and what didn't go well.
Yes.
And how to utilize those things that did go well and fortify them, and how to avoid things that that it wasn't so long ago. I mean, I mentioned The Martian just as an example of something that went really well. Actually, one of the first meetings I took with Ridley on that didn't go well at all, and that was absolutely was avoidable, and it was absolutely on me. I think I played Ridley too much music. That you might say, how could you play too much music? it's pretty scary if you don't have much to play and you've got a director coming to visit you.
Yes.
And he wants to hear music and you've only got 10 seconds of something that's not very good. That's one scary situation, which hasn't happened to me, I have to say. But on this occasion, he'd been in France, I think, prepping for his next movie. And he'd been away quite a bit. And when he got back to Los Angeles, I did try to plonk on him too much music. And the meeting didn't go really badly, but it was a little shaky because, when I look back on it, thinking, well, look, I was trying to get him on board with my thematic material, which was fine. And that's advisable to do in any early meeting on a movie. But more than that, because some time had gone by, I had time to write 20, 25 minutes of cues.
Yeah.
And possibly I would have been smarter to have kept that in my back pocket and only played him a couple of cues which involved the theme and read his body language, see how that was going. It wasn't a negative meeting, but as I say, we were slightly overwhelmed him. And that I absolutely learned from that. I looked back on that and thought, yeah, I could do better. It wasn't the music that I was presenting. It was the amount of music that was what kind of overwhelmed him at that meeting. He wasn't expecting. He was just probably expecting an hour with me, a little chit chat, hear me playing a theme on a piano, and then maybe a couple of cues orchestrated from the sequencer. But I think I pushed too much music on him.
Okay.
And that slightly overwhelmed him to the extent that he was a little bit bemused and a little bit overwhelmed and wasn't sure how to react. So, those sort of things are lessons. Even if I thought I had got far enough in front that I could really play lots of music and maybe get a lot of music signed off on in one go. That was a mistake. And I've learned from that. So, yeah, I think the sort of ups and downs per project as projects come and go. With each project, depending on what you're lucky enough to be doing, I don't tend to do the same sort of film over and over again. I know some composers are kind of stuck in a rut of rom-coms or thrillers or horror films or whatever it is they do. But that must be tricky. That must be tricky to go into each one of those freshly. Having said that, obviously I've done a few Shreks and a few Narnias. I have done sequels. But with those, even looking at the Shreks, they always brought a fresh character in there, whether it's Puss in Boots or, there was always or Prince Charming. There were always other characters, peripheral characters that one could tap into to make the thing feel fresh. But I think to learn from one's mistakes and learn from one's small successes. When things do go well, it's worth looking back and thinking, why did that go so well? What is it that I did that made that all work?
Yes, thank you, Harry, for elaborating on that. And you just told me you learned from that experience, that Martian experience. So what did you do differently on your first meetings which concerned The Last Duel?
That in itself was very different because I was never in the same room with Ridley Scott. It was completely during lockdown. He was in his cutting room and I was in my home here in Los Angeles. So that brought in a different sort of a balance of things in itself. But obviously I didn't try and hit him up with 15 to 25 minutes of music in the first meeting. That's what I did differently. But it was different anyhow because I was having to send him music as opposed to him coming to my studio and listening in my environment.
Yes.
That's always what we aim at as composers. It's the best thing we can do is to be is to have the chance, at least a chance, to present our music in the best environment, the most favorable conditions possible to us. And there is no better place, I'm sure every other composer would agree, than sitting in the G spot in your composing room, because that's where we hear the music. That's where it feels the best to us. So, over the years, I noticed a change on, I think as I did the Shrek series over 10 years, from the first Shrek, where Jeffrey Katzenberg, although DreamWorks Animation was over in Glendale, my studio was at Hans's at the time, which is in Santa Monica. And there's a hell of a lot of traffic in between those two places. And that you got to get in a car and be in the car, depending on what time of day a meeting was going to be, for quite some time to be in the same room. Now, I think something that Hans and his his methods over the years leading up to me, say, doing Shrek, the first Shrek. He was very instrumental in having directors want to be not in their cutting room, but in the composing room when they first heard the music. You know, just by virtue of the fact that he was kind of the champion of this demo thing.
Yes.
I can make, if you come to my studio, you can hear what sounds like an orchestra. We can give it to you and collaborate in that kind of way. So yeah, on the first Shrek, absolutely, Jeffrey Katzenberg would come over with whoever his director was. On the first Shrek, it was Andrew Adamson, who became a really good friend of mine. And that was the norm. By Shrek 3, which is probably 7 years later, you know, his secretary would pick up the phone and say, tell Harry to be over in Glendale, you know, at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon and bring music. So things had changed. And that was obviously, it's nothing to do with a pandemic, but I think we all try and encourage meetings to be in our layers, but do we succeed? Not often. And also, I think through the advent of the internet and technological advances, for instance, this movie I did for Pierre Morel a few months ago, The Ambush. I was never in the same room with him. I have been in the past, years and years and years ago. He brought his film Taken to me, which I decided not to do. Yeah, bad decision. So I knew him, but he called me, said, look, I've got this movie. Would you have a look at it? I'd love you to score it. I had a look at it, really liked it, really wanted to do it. And so I did it, sent him the music, and that's how it went. I wasn't at the mix. I wasn't, I wasn't at his final dab, anything. But, and I think that, you know, transatlantically, especially between sort of Dean Street, which is the sort of epicenter of the film industry in England, in London, and here in Hollywood, you know, it's quite easy and normal to not even be in the same room as a filmmaker you're trying to collaborate with. But ideally, that's where the sparks can fly, and being able to be in the same room. So, you know, I always remember Joel Schumacher being such an attractive man, such a lovely person to be around. Why? Because he would come in with his wonderfully freshly washed long silver hair and his cowboy boots, and he'd come in and spend the first hour telling stories, talking about his past or I don't know. You're just a fascinating man. And then, you know, I'd always be struggling to actually say, Joel, can I play this cue? I have to break the party up a bit. But no, that's where relationships are made, I think, not over the internet. But yeah, beggars can't be choosers. So on The Last Duel, that's what it was. Ridley called me, said he had the movie. He thought I'd be ideal for this movie. I wasn't expecting a call at all. You know, I'd started one of his previous movies,
Alien Covenant.
Yeah, and he decided to go in a different direction. So what can you do? I thought, well, okay, fair enough. He wanted something sounded pretty goldsmithy, and I wasn't really going down that path. So I wasn't really expecting a call from him. So I was delighted when he called. I said, yeah, absolutely. When do I start? So we had a great time with The Last Duel. It's a film. I think it's a really intelligent film, smart film.
Yes.
And it has something to say about a few things, actually. It's quite enlightening and invigorating, ultimately. And I had a great time scoring that. Love it.
Great. And you've worked with Ridley Scott a couple of times. Prior to The Martian, you had scored Kingdom of Heaven, which is a personal favorite of mine. And I also like The Martian a lot. And when it comes to working on a big film, such as The Last Duel or Kingdom of Heaven or The Martian, with a big director, how do you find the key areas on which you need to concentrate?
Look, I think in order to give oneself, I always think of it as gathering an army. In order to give yourself the best chance of success with a director on a film, I think one needs to arm oneself with plenty of material, thematic material, harmonic material,
Yes.
sonic ideas, specific sonic ideas, and a concept. Having worked a lot with Tony Scott, he was nothing if not an ideas guy. It was always about an idea, whether it's the True Romance Marimbas thing, which was his idea, the Karl Orff piece, or I can name many instances of scores that I've filmed, films that I scored with him, where the whole conversation to begin with was what the concept would be, and Ridley's not dissimilar. Sitting down with Ridley Scott, or at least on a Zoom call with Ridley Scott, at the beginning of The Last Duel, we decided it should be quite a vocal score, and I wouldn't use a large choir, I'd use a really small choir. I'd find some really cool soloists, and write a decent theme for each of the characters, and then Bob's your uncle. That was it. Yeah, I mean that's plenty of artillery to be armed with, and then it's on to find ways of telling the story using those things that one's collected together.
Great. And Harry, I think communication, depending on the film and depending on the filmmakers, is really, really vital and essential. And I'm interested in Ridley Scott's approach for that. How does he verbalize or not verbalize what he is looking for, be it colors, emotion?
Well, he doesn't necessarily say what he's looking for. He's a good collaborator, and he's very experienced, as you know, and he's quietly confident of himself. And then I would imagine he's confident of the people he surrounds himself with. So here's the first thing he's asking me my reaction to the film. So he wants to know what I think directly after I've watched the film for the first time. And that's where the conversation starts. But he's not one to say, I want this and I want that and I want that.
Okay.
There wasn't any temp track to speak of on The Last Duel, and certainly not on Gucci. So it's not like one's struggling with that. It's normally the most creative time is right after I've been taken on by Ridley. We've had initial conversation. He's asked me what I like about the film, what I don't, what I think's working, what I don't think's working, and off we go. So I'll go away for a couple of weeks and do what I can do, and then present him with my ideas.
Great.
And take it from there.
Do you think Ridley Scott has a special quality which kind of sets him apart from other directors that you have worked with over the course of your career?
Yeah, I think he's got several really unique qualities. I think his films are so beautiful to look at, and they're often really well edited as well. And the production design, the cinematography, Dariusz Wolski, he's lucky enough to have these really quality people to collaborate with. So when it comes to music, I think he might have said, when he first showed me The Martian, for instance, look, it's really well written, it's well acted, and I hope it's well directed. So don't F it up. So he's just thinking, come on, play to our standard. So it's a pretty great arena to be working in, I can tell you. I feel very fortunate.
Great. And The Last Duel, of course, is set in medieval times.
Yeah.
And how much research went into that, or did several things kind of come to you naturally based on your instincts and previous experience?
Yeah, previous experience. I don't research the film. I don't think it was any need to research anything. I did go to music school. I know about something about medieval music, but I'm also I'm not averse to taking advice. The two people I know, one is an ex-boss, Richard Harvey, and one is an ex-assistant, David Buckley, are both really quite well-informed. And I took advice and collaborated with both of them in some respect on the film. So I'm a great believer in if I have a black spot or I have a dark spot about something musically, I don't know why I wouldn't ask for advice and help in those directions. The music for The Last Duel didn't have to be medieval music per se. The important thing was to try and help tell the story, and the story is told in such a specific way in this film that it was quite straightforward to delineate these three characters, because each of the chapters is dedicated more to the story of one of the characters. So consequently, I focus more thematically on each of the characters during their chapter, which made a lot of sense to me and actually made it very orderly to work on the movie. Sometimes, work on a big action film, for instance, I don't know, a movie like Total Recall or I don't know, Armageddon or something. And it's difficult to know where to start or where to stop, or the music doesn't really stop ever. It just comes here and the action continues. And, or Mulan, for instance, a lot of music in a movie like that. A lot of music.
Yes.
85 minutes, I don't know how much music there was there. And sometimes that's very overwhelming. In The Last Duel, but just because of the nature of the structure of this thing, that, okay, I'm going to focus on Marguerite. What do I need for Marguerite? A fantastic vocalist. And I found that in Grace Davidson.
Yes.
An English soprano. What I need for Legree, I want something haunting, strange, slightly unsettling. I found that with Yestin Davis, a countertenor from England also. And with the Crouch character, he's such a pompous ass. I mean, he's so sure of himself and of how he needs to be projected to the outside world. He's all for God and King. So his theme, I'd say, was a much more conventional theme, something that could work in another movie.
Yes.
For a similar character. It's a sort of rising theme with a certain chord shift in the middle of it, which is fairly, it puts you in mind of a soldier or someone who thinks or is a hero or thinks he's a hero. Whereas the other two thematic pieces that are prevalent in the score are slightly less conventional, I'd say.
Yes. And as you mentioned previously, it's very intelligent filmmaking. You get one story from 3 different perspectives and vantage points. And at the beginning of the film, it's told from Matt Damon's point of view. So at first, you wouldn't expect him to be a pompous ass, as you put it.
No, you quite like him at first. There's nothing. He seems to be standing up for his rights, for himself. He seems to be a loyal friend. He seems to be the soldier that he says he is. That people think he is. Yeah, it's just his attitude towards. There's a couple of lines that he says that are pretty shocking concerning his wife.
Yes, absolutely.
But can one stand here centuries later and blame him? No, not really. Probably, he was behaving as men behaved in 1380. This is based on some sort of a true story, I believe. So, I think this is the world that they lived in. But that's not to say we have to like him.
No.
And he's not really the villain of the story. My God, if there is, then it's going to be Legree, who also doesn't realize, it doesn't seem to realize how offensive his actions are.
Yes, and Legree, Adam Driver's character, he comes across as a rather smooth person who turns out to be the quote-unquote villain. And at the end, in the 3rd chapter of the film, you really start to sympathize with Marguerite, and you find out how everything really comes together. So that was really interesting. And I think the film, to me personally, I think it's one of Ridley Scott's best movies of the past, let's say, 10 years. Yeah, it's a really well told story.
Yeah, I think so. And you could freeze frame any moment in it, and it's just gonna look beautiful. No one shoots those things like Ridley. Yeah, and Derek Volsky. I don't recall who the cinematographer was on Kingdom of Heaven.
That was John Matheson.
John Matheson, another master. Yeah, absolutely. But and Ridley himself is just such a visual director, storyteller. So yeah, it's a convergence of a lot of visually exciting talent by the sound of it.
Yes, absolutely. And Harry, I would like to talk about the voices. You mentioned Grace Davidson, and the music, it sounds so, let's say, accurate. It sounds so pure, almost innocent. And what were you looking for in terms of the voices? How did you zero in on Grace Davidson?
Actually, I was put onto her by the film editor.
Okay.
who Claire Simpson, who's has really good taste in music, clearly, and we were casting about for the right voice, and she asked me if I'd heard this particular girl, and actually I had been talking to my old friend Dave Buckley, who studied music at Cambridge, no less. So he's and you know he knows his medieval stuff, and he knows a lot of singers. We were both choristers in England back in the day, so yeah, and I think he put me on to Grace Davidson. He had so her name cropped up from two different places.
Yes. Okay. Great.
So yeah, I had a lot of help on the way finding these things. Yestin Davis, I had used briefly on The Kingdom of Heaven, but although really liked the texture of his voice and the nature of his voice, he didn't play a very large role in the score for Kingdom. So yeah, he certainly did in this score.
You know how much I appreciate your music. I grew up listening to your music. I was 13 years old when I watched Enemy of the State in the theater.
I was at my party the other night, my birthday party. I saw Trevor Raymond. Yes. We don't see each other very often, but we have a good time when we do see each other.
Lovely guy, and
he's a really sweet guy.
And I really love your music, and I think I told you that when I also came to visit at Abbey Road when you did Penguins.
Oh yeah. So I've just finished a score for Polar Bear.
Great.
Yes, it's the next Penguins.
Really?
I mean, it's the next Disneynature one. I literally just finished it. I'm recording it in 2 weeks' time.
The same filmmakers, yes?
Yes.
Great.
So I did Monkey Kingdom, Polar Bear, and now here we go with Monkey Kingdom, Penguins, and now we're doing Polar Bears. So I've finished it. I had my score signed off on the other day. So I'm very happy about that. And now I've just got to orchestrate it, and then I'll be taking it to Abbey Road, and off we go again.
Great. Can you disclose some information about that film?
I just did.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the musical approach and.
Well, of course, the film has a more serious overtone than Penguins, for instance. Penguins are funny for us humans when we look at them, and there seem to be a lot of them. They're not going to be extinct anytime soon. Now, polar bears, the ice cap could be partly removed by the time our lifetimes are over. It's shocking to think. So although it's Disneynature doing what Disneynature do really well and have done really well over the past 10 or 20 years, there is a more serious tone to it than any other film I've done for the Disneynature people, because of the nature of the fact that their environment is disappearing. These polar bears have learned to swim really well, because there's a lot of water there instead of ice. So I'm really excited about it. It'll come out on Earth Day, I think, which is in April, I think. I'm going to record the score at Abbey Road in the middle of January, early January. And I'm all done writing it. I had a great time doing it.
Great.
And I'll let you know how that goes.
Oh, thank you. It's a really exciting project, and I love the Disneynature films, and
so do I.
Penguins, of course, will always hold a special place in my heart, as I attended 2 days of the recording at Abbey Road.
You did?
Yes, and that was such a fantastic time, and I can't wait to hear this score. And Harry, you mentioned your brother Rupert. What have you done with him?
Well, Rupert and I decided about it was about 6 months ago now. We should probably do something together again. We did this George Clooney thing called Catch 22 a few years ago. We had a good time, but it was 4 1-hour things, or were they 2 hours? No, I think they were 1 hour. It was 4 1-hour things, so it was what we call a limited series. So it was great, but it was kind of over before it started. This one, be careful what you wish for. 10 1-hour episodes, and each one probably 40 minutes of fully orchestral music in it. So it was a good job there were 2 of us. we needed that, but we had a great time. We've just finished mixing, I think, the 8th episode. We've got a couple more to mix. We've recorded all of them, and that'll be broadcast. I think the trailer for it just popped out, which is why I'm able to talk about it. It's called The Gilded Age. It's written by Julian Fellowes, the same guy who did Downton Abbey and Gosforth Park. Yeah. So really smart dialogue, really cool costumes, great story. It's kind of Downton Abbey, but in New York. In the 1880s, I think it is. It was when all the money came flooding into New York and people building things and creating electricity and goodness knows what. So it was a very exciting time in New York's history. And the music's quite vibrant and reflects that. So it was really good fun. That's something that Rupert and I did together, and we're just coming to the end of the first season.
Great. I mean,
I think that starts in January on HBO.
Great. Looking forward to it. And you and Rupert seem to form a really great team. I mean, of course, you are brothers. You are his older brother, and it's great to have you and him collaborate. And I think you should collaborate more often down the road, because I think it's
but we actually no, well, absolutely. One always has to find the right project to do these things.
Yes.
Not everything is suitable for that, and obviously we have got to go our own separate ways. So the moons just aligned on that one. It seemed perfect, and the filmmakers had the desire to see that through.
Yes.
But interestingly, I have collaborated in the last 6 months on a really cool Netflix documentary, which I can't say the title of yet, with another composer, not my brother, but who has been known to co-compose scores with his brother. So we're actually cross-fertilizing the families here. Great. We're ditching our brothers, and we've done something together. But more news on that in probably the next 3 weeks.
Okay, great. I mean, so you've been very busy, and
very busy. Yeah, and lots of variety. Documentary,
The Ambush,
beautiful. Love that. The Ambush is a fantastic film. It might be my favorite film of Pierre Morel. Entirely in Arabic, and set in the Middle East.
Okay.
Concerning an ambush that happened. It's kind of Black Hawk Down, but with no American square-jawed Marines in it at all.
Okay.
No Americans in it at all. So it was a challenging project. It's really tense, really, and I have no idea how Pierre pulled it off. How you shoot such a thing? It's these soldiers who are trapped in their armored car in a small valley and surrounded by insurgents, and ambushed, and how they try and get out, and some people come to try and save them. So it wasn't I was a bit concerned originally that it might be an action film, because I'm not really keen on scoring action films at the moment. I've gone through phases of enjoying it, and I'm on a phase where I don't really want to do that right now. But this is more high tension. There's a big difference there.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
And I really enjoyed that. So yeah, that's something that's been completed. I don't know whether it'll ever be shown in America. It was shown in the UAE.
That's what I wanted to talk to you about, because it hasn't had a wide global release yet.
No.
And I'm looking forward to it.
And maybe it won't either. It's not. Maybe that's not the object of making that film.
Yeah. Okay.
There's some really startling true life things that happen to a group of people, and they have nothing to do with Americans or English people.
Okay.
To do with some people who live in the Middle East, and that's where their nationalities are. So I think that's where the film will have an audience. And I don't know. Maybe someone will try and put it on in the cinema in America, but I'm not certain. I'm not holding my breath.
Is there going to be a score release at least? Do you know that?
I do know that the producer said he'd love to release a score, and I also know that I haven't put one together yet. So there's no sign of it right now. He said he'd like to put some banging vinyl together. I was like, okay.
A vinyl, okay.
Done well in Yemen. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, those are my projects, Mychael. You had it from the horse's mouth. Is there anything else I can talk to you about before I run off?
Oh, yes. I was going to, you mentioned you basically said all there is to say about it. But I was wondering, the end credit piece in House of Gucci, is that a piece of score?
Yeah,
Thought so.
that's basically, if you hear that piece,
Yes.
then you've heard my score.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you that House of Gucci had as little as 8 minutes of score,
Yeah, thought so. Yeah.
and the largest piece in that score is the end credits piece, which is about 7 minutes long.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm afraid I couldn't find any. It was Ridley asked me to try and find some spots for score without dislodging his
Yes.
song that he already had in there. And I did find a few spots, some of which a couple of which he kept, and a couple of which he preferred to keep in silence.
Yes.
So it wasn't. I don't feel too crestfallen about this. The first 2 or 3 minute piece on that was specially written for the end credits, and then what follows for the next 3 or 4 minutes are the variations of a theme that I wrote for Ridley to put into the film. A couple of them are in the film as score, and a couple of them never made it.
Let me just wrap up by saying, regardless of the amount of music in Gucci, I really enjoyed the film.
Yeah.
I think it's Ridley's most song-driven film to date.
Oh, it is, yeah.
I can't recall any other film which had more songs. Even The Martian had quite a few songs, but wait.
You had ABBA songs.
Yes.
Yeah.
But of course, a lovely score written by you, and
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to watching Gucci again. And I just rewatched Last Duel this morning, and
You did?
I did. Yes, it's on Disney. It's on Disney Plus already. Yes.
Yeah, no, I know that.
And of course, I'm looking forward to your future collaborations, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you cooked up with Rupert. And Harry, is there anything else you would like to add to our great conversation?
No, I mean I hope that I'll continue to have the odd opportunity to do more. I mean I'm looking forward to getting my teeth into. I've got a couple of films that I'm going to be starting later in the year, later next year, and something I've got to start pretty much immediately now. But I have a gap in the middle, and those gaps always seem to get filled up, and it's just fun and exciting to see what might lie ahead. I have no idea.
Yes.
I mean, if I told you that the chickens are trying to get back in, or at least, Chicken Run 2 may be on the horizon. That may be something you want to, if you enjoyed the first one, you want to look forward to.
Harry, I know you have to run, and thank you very much for doing one more interview. It's our 4th interview, I'm proud to say.
Yes, gosh.
And I'm looking forward to more chats down the road.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael. Well, thanks for having me, man.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
And you. Bye.
Bye, Harry.